Previously on Canadian Butthead. Well, boys, I think I messed up. This thing looks way too good for a daily driven SUV. Wasn't really going for a big correction here, but look at that. She is looking pretty good. And this is just after compounding too. I still got to put a finish on this. So I could probably just leave it like this and jump straight to the coating, but I want to get that extra little bit of gloss out of it. I'm just going to zip over the whole thing really quickly with the finishing polish and a foam pad, and then we'll jump on the ceramic coatings. So if you didn't watch the last video where I compounded the whole 4runner, go back and watch that first because I explain more in depth of the whole plan here for the paint correction. Today we're just picking up on the finishing polish and moving really quickly on everything. There really isn't a whole lot of refinement needed on this. The end result after the compounding looks really good. So this is really just to pull out that last little bit of gloss, just to make sure that it's gonna look the best that it can. And if you're seeing what looks like spots all over the hood here in the garage lighting, that it is there in real life, but that's mostly just tiny little rock chips on the front end of this thing that can't be fixed with paint correction. So what I'm using here is Meguiar's M205 finishing polish and a yellow Rupa's foam pad. As you can see, even though I'm about 6'3", I still need a ladder to reach the roof. I also realized that I probably should have checked to see if this shot was even lined up, because you can't really see anything that I'm doing up there, so let's just move on. Okay, down on the side here you can actually see what's going on. That's a little better. One thing I don't think I really touched on during the compounding video was how much product that I put on a pad. In general, for any kind of paint correction, whether you're compounding or polishing, less is more as far as how much stuff you should put on your pad. And in this phase, I'm just putting a couple of drops on a pad. Now, keep in mind though, I'm not carefully measuring out every single drop like you see on some people's videos where they they take like an extra 5 minutes to perfectly put exact pea-sized drops perfectly spread out across their pad. This is the real world, man. Slather some of that crap on there and get to work. It's not that precise of a science, guys. Just, you don't want to use too much, because then really you're just kind of clogging up your pad and it's just going to glide over top of the surface and not bite in. Usually just 3 or 4 smaller drops on there. It's really all it takes. At this point too, I believe I backed the speed down on the machine just a little bit compared to how I had it for the compounding phase. Mainly because I'm not trying to do any cutting here, where the surface is already fixed. Like, the scratches are removed. Whatever is going to be removed is removed by now. And all we're doing at this stage is just, the compound that I used was fairly aggressive, and I also used microfiber pads. So when you're done compounding, there's a good chance you're going to have a little bit of haze left over. And all we're looking for here in this step is just to clear up that haze. All of the heavy lifting is done, the scratches are removed. This is just a matter of, the reason you follow up with this polish is because the compounding was so aggressive. Alright, as usual, I'm going to be going with my favorite ceramic coatings, which is G-Technic Crystal Serum Light and EXO, this is version 4. I'll be using panel wipe as a prep to wipe the surface, get any polishing oils off first. And these are pretty straightforward to use. I've got another video showing you how to use them. I'm kind of under the gun for time right now, so I'm not going to film too much of this. But I'll try and get a little bit. Maybe we'll do the hood. I'll show you how it goes on. But I'll put a link up there for for the other video where I kind of go into depth of how to apply these coatings. But we got to get going on this. Step one of the ceramic coating process here is obviously you want to make sure that you get any of the remaining polishing oils off of the surface before you start trying to apply any coating. So any leftover compound or polish that might be still behind from when you're correcting the paint, you got to get that off, because that can be a do or die for whether or not this coating is going to work. You need to have this thing like surgically clean. So in this case I'm using G-Technics Panel White. It's their own product. It's just a little bit nicer and easier to use, but if all you've got is just isopropyl alcohol mixed 50-50 with water, you're good to go with that too. As far as actually putting the coating on the paint, it's pretty straightforward. This is one time that you will see me use a crosshatch pattern, because now at this point the only objective is just consistent, even coverage. And so I want to make sure that there's no spots that I've missed just because of the angle that I'm standing or something. So I always try to kind of move back and forth and make sure I do a crosshatch pattern just to ensure that I've gotten everything equally. As far as how much product to put on the applicator and how long to let it sit on the surface and how much of a panel you can do all at once, I can't really tell you guys, because all this stuff changes. It very much depends on the weather, like the humidity, the temperature. For coatings it makes a big difference, but if you're just using a wax or a sealant, then it's pretty much, as long as it's above freezing, it's always going to be the same deal. This stuff is very finicky, to the point where doing this 4runner it was getting pretty late in the fall. It was getting colder out and definitely humid. It was raining like almost every day. And this coating, I use these same G-Technic coatings on pretty much everything I work on. I'm not really a fan of other stuff. And the way that this behaved on this vehicle was like using a completely different coating compared to, say, that Datsun that I'd have a video on. As far as flash time and how long to leave it on the surface, it was like totally different. Whole different set of rules, and it was all just based on different weather. I pulled the inspection light out here just so you can see that there's a bit of a haze on the surface, just because the regular camera angle you can't really tell that there's anything on there. But if you look in the light, you can definitely see there's a haze on there. So that's the coating doing its thing. I think in this case I left it on there maybe 5 minutes or so before I wiped it off. As far as towels for removal, I like to use at least 2 to get the coating off and level the surface. Ideally I'd like to use 3. On vehicles that I care more about, I'd use 3, and on the third and final towel I'll pull out this inspection light just to make sure I haven't missed any spots. Once again, I don't want to keep on coming back to the fact that this is my own vehicle, but I have already about 500 times in this series, so what's one more? But in this case, I don't really care if I find a high spot in this thing that I missed like a week later. It's no big deal, I'll just go back and fix it. But this is probably the most important stage in the ceramic coating process, guys. You need to be super thorough and like quadruple check your work, because if you leave any spots behind at this point, you're gonna have a high spot. And if you don't know what a high spot is or what they're like to deal with, you will once you've had one. Having a high spot means you're going to have to pull the buffer out and you're going to have to compound it down. Probably in the best case. Worst case, you're going to have to wet sand it off depending on the coating you're using. And that's kind of a pain to start all over like that. You want to avoid that if you can, obviously, because it's just a total waste of time. So this is crucial that you really pay attention to what you're doing. Make sure your lighting is right. Make sure you're checking from a whole bunch of different angles. Don't just stand in one spot and keep looking at the same direction, because it changes. You might look at a door and think, oh, it's perfect, there's nothing there, and if you take 4 steps to your left and then crouch down, you're going to see a whole bunch of stuff that you missed. So you gotta dance around like an idiot and make sure you're checking it from all angles, man. Here's kind of an interesting tip for if you're having a hard time with the proper diffused lighting that you need to be able to see high spots in the coating as you're applying it. If you have white walls in your garage or shop or wherever you're working, take your regular inspection light that you would use for finding swirls and scratches and turn it around so it's facing directly at the wall, and use that white wall as a diffuser, and you can see how the light has changed on that door. I have my same work light I was using for paint correction. I just turned it around and I'm using that as a source of diffused lighting, because just a sharp spotlight, it really doesn't show the haze or what some coatings will have a high spot look like. Some of them will be more of a rainbow slick kind of a look. In the case of these G-Technic coatings, I find it's usually more just kind of like a dark hazy spot, which in my opinion is kind of harder to find. So doing this by kind of a ghetto way of diffusing your same light instead of buying a separate one or upgrading the lighting in your garage or something, it's kind of a way to cheat the system a little bit and try it out for yourself. It might work, it might not. Just remember, you can't, if all you've got is like a cheap flashlight or something like that, you're probably going to want to pull it outside. If you don't have lighting in a shop to work with, the next best thing, if you're going to go with natural lighting, would be going outside on a cloudy day. That's going to give you the best diffused lighting for seeing high spots. And I guess in that regard, if you think you've got it perfect and you're all proud of yourself, don't start bragging to your friends until you've seen your vehicle outside on a cloudy day. Because if you got high spots, that's when you're going to find them. And unlike scratches and swirl marks and stuff that you need direct sun to see those, for coatings, it's the cloudy days that are the heartbreakers. So just keep that in mind. I still go over everything with my spotlight here, just because, like with everything else, I just like having a whole bunch of options. I want to see a whole bunch of different sources of light. I've got everything right there, so why not? If I can mimic some kind of a rare situation that's going to show something, then I'm going to use everything I got in the arsenal to try and recreate any possibilities. So that's G-Technic Crystal Serum Light and EXO. And honestly, a lot of the coatings from most of the main manufacturers will be a pretty similar process. So this stuff will apply to most of the ceramic coatings out there. They all have their minor differences here and there, but in general, this is how most ceramic coatings are applied. At least the DIY level coatings. The professional ones are sometimes a bit of a different story, but if you're sitting on YouTube learning how to apply a ceramic coating, probably not a professional anyways, so. Alright you guys, this sucker is done. D-U-N, done. We got a layer of Crystal Serum Light and then one layer of EXO on top. Now G-Technic recommends putting 2 layers of EXO on, and I've never felt the need to. And I think a lot of people, they mean to do 2 layers, and then when it comes down to it, they think, yeah, one's enough. It's kind of a pain to wipe off. It's kind of an interesting thing because the Crystal Serum Light, that's the base coat, is doing a job and rejecting the coat that you're trying to put on top, so it's hard to get it to kind of rub in. So by the time you're done fighting with it for one lap around the vehicle, usually you're thinking, yeah, that's enough for one day. And I find 1 layer is totally fine. The only real reason to do 2 is just for more even coverage. But I'm pretty thorough with how I'm doing that, so. A little too dark out to get any after shots in the sunshine, but I guess we'll have to hang on to one of the next videos coming up. And I say this thing is done, but I really just mean the paintwork is done. We still have a little bit more odds and ends and stuff to do. We've got to dress the tires. We're going to coat the trim. I did this with G-Technic C4 on all the black trim the first time around, and I was really pleased with it. So it held up pretty good. It still looks pretty decent. It was kind of white and gray, faded kind of stuff when I first got this thing, and it still looks pretty black like 2.5 years later. So I'm just going to touch it up though, just because I know it works, so why not keep it up? And then we still have the interior to knock out. Again, there's not a whole lot to go on in there. Oh, how you doing? How you doing? I keep it pretty clean in there in general, so there's not a whole lot of heavy cleaning to do, but we're still going to touch on that. So we'll do, door jams, clean and treat the leather, all the plastics in there. We'll do all that stuff. We still have the trim coating to do. We got to take care of the windows. These things, I just kind of wiped them down. We got to get a better clean on them. I might even polish them actually, I don't know. Then we'll get the crispy glamour shots that you guys have all come to know and love. And I'll show you what this thing looks like in the end result. Now I'm going to go ahead and go back to beating the crap out of it on a daily basis. Wash, rinse, repeat. Alright guys, I got to get out of here. I'll catch you on the next one.